Hey, there we are. Good evening, everybody. This is Dillon Cruz, the tattooed theologian and the God Squad pod here. We are super duper excited tonight because we have Dr. Kristin Du Mez. Everybody knows who she is because she wrote this little book called Jesus and John Wayne, which was a New York Times bestseller. She is a professor of history at Calvin University, a senior democracy fellow with the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI. Her research focuses on intersection of gender, religion, and politics. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, Religion News Service, Christianity Today, and has been interviewed by anybody who's anybody. Her most recent books include Jesus and John Wayne and the forthcoming Live, Laugh, Love, The Secret History of White Christian Women and the World They Made, which comes out September 15th, 2026. She is a Distinguished Associate of the Institute of Christian Studies in Toronto and recently served as a fellow at the University of Notre Dame Center for Philosophy and Religion, and taught at Calvin College. Dr. Du Mez, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the God Squad pod. It is a real treat to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, you created a little bit of a stink just a few years ago because you poked the patriarchal Christian bear with Jesus and John Wayne, which I finished today. And I was telling Dr. Du Mez backstage that it's kind of ironic that we're talking today of all days, because August 13th, 1990 was the day that yours truly landed at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, as a young Southern Baptist who did not see the irony of trying to follow Jesus while joining the Marine Corps. So that's just a little bit of irony there. But what was the reception like for that book?
Oof. I wrote it as kind of a nobody. I was a scholar. It's not my first book. It's my second book. But I didn't have any sort of platform or any real presence in evangelical spaces. I was living a rather quiet life when that book came out. And in the initial reception, I didn't really have any connections inside that world really to speak of. And so it first kind of went out to national audiences, right? It debuted on NPR's Morning Edition, and it got kind of the secular media attention. Things were going well, but I was just kind of waiting for it to find its readers in evangelical spaces. And I knew, honestly, that pushback to the book would actually put it in front of a whole lot of people. So I was kind of biding my time. And it didn't take too long. It was about 2 or 3 months after the book came out that people started really paying attention. Christianity Today, after pressure, I think, from what I've heard, finally came out with a review of the book, and it was a dumpster fire of a review in which the editor-in-chief, I believe, compared me to to his ex-girlfriend that he took to a Gothard seminar or something like that. So that was a gift. It was a gift. And Beth Moore tweeted about it, and and Holy Post, the podcast, did a 4-piece series on it, all right around the same time, and that just absolutely launched it into that space. But still, the real critics didn't come out for months, and I just kept waiting. And rumor has it, cannot confirm, they deny, but it's compelling rumor that they had a kind of group chat going, and all of a sudden, a few months out, my goodness, right, the attacks just started coming left and right. I actually took to carrying this book with me. I was so glad when it came out in paperback, because it was hard carrying the hardcover with me, just to have on hand at any point to rebut all of the misrepresentations, the lies that were coming out. There was like a critical review, scathing review coming out like by the hour. It seemed it was wild. And yeah, it's been, I should say though, like, so that's the public stuff. If you were on Twitter back in the day, you watched it all go down, because turns out I was a very thick again, and I kind of enjoyed it. But it that's actually the tiny minority in terms of responses. I have gotten thousands of messages from readers and, like 100 to 1, 500 to 1, just effusive praise and gratitude from readers raised in this culture who all say some version of this is the story of my life, but I never understood how all of these pieces fit together. And so, what you see on social media or what you used to see isn't really representative. So it's actually been a wild ride, but it's been really gratifying.
I mean, you're a historian at a pretty small college,
Yes.
and all of a sudden you're all over the place. I'm getting an echo. Is anybody else getting an echo? Okay.
I'm not, but
Okay. For a second there, I was. I'm not hearing it now. Yeah. So you're a historian, a cultural historian at a small college, and then you're kind of in the middle of a patriarchal firestorm because of people like Mark Driscoll and John Piper and their acolytes, Doug Wilson, Joel Webon, and those kind of folks. And I remember in the 90s, when I was in the Marine Corps, I went to one of those Promise Keeper events at Hawaii Baptist Academy. I saw Coach McCartney and Super Bowl winning quarterback Trent Dilfer speak in the HBA gym. And I was, really excited to be there. And I remember using the term servant leadership. And then I'm reading Jesus and John Wayne, and I'm just like, that was my life. I was living that. Holy crap. I didn't realize that that's what was going on. And what really hit me today as I was finishing that book before I read the intro and conclusion to the new book was how you break it down about the evangelical tendency to wash away the abuse scandals, to elide them as if they're not important. And we've talked a lot about the SBC on this show and on the John Fugelsang show. We've talked about December. You've written about sexual abuse in church. And can you just kind of, for folks who haven't read that yet, before we get to Live, Laugh, Love, can you kind of just sort of explicate what that looks like, and because we've got a predator in the White House, and we've got people covering up his predatory activities right now, and evangelicals are still on board, and it makes my brain and my heart and my soul hurt.
That's kind of the origin story of Jesus and John Wayne. So in the early 2000s, students of mine, young men at Calvin, I was teaching a U.S. history course and on Teddy Roosevelt and his conception of really militant masculinity and empire and all these things. And they told me, Professor Du Mez, there's a book that you've got to read. And they pointed me to John Eldridge's Wild at Heart. Right. So I was so intrigued as a historian of gender and culture and religion, what was going on there. And so I actually spent a year and a half, 2 years even, back in 2005 and 2006, doing the preliminary research for what became Jesus and John Wayne. And I was so shocked by what I was seeing. I actually didn't even know what to do with it. Mark Driscoll and just this really misogynistic, crass theology and a really aggressive version of Christianity. And so I, for a variety of reasons, I ended up setting that book aside for a time, but I didn't stop paying attention to the men. And in the ensuing decade, I watched as one after another of these men, either directly or indirectly, were implicated in sexual abuse, right, as perpetrators or as friends of perpetrators who are giving cover to them. And so when it was in the aftermath of the Access Hollywood tapes releasing, when we saw white evangelicals, no problem. They stayed with him, and everybody was asking, how could they? It was at that point that I thought, I think I know, because they have been defending, supporting predators in their own churches and in their own organizations for a very long time. And I had already been mapping that out. That's when I dusted off the old research. Also consulted a lawyer because at that point it was pre-Me Too movement. And it wasn't a lot of the stuff just existed. The stories were out there for anybody who cared to pay attention, but they were usually on personal blogs or local news stories. And it wasn't a national news story yet. By the time I'd finished the book, it had become, right, we had the Houston Chronicle come out and a number of other stories, and more just keep coming. So I knew that that had to be a piece of the story. I knew that was part of the fruit of this really militant conception of Christian manhood and also of Christianity itself. And yes, I was shocked. I was shocked at first. Writing that chapter, the last chapter of Jesus and John Wayne on sex abuse, it was the hardest chapter to write. Hardest to edit. I just found myself like not even wanting to turn the page and proofread it. It was so awful. And you know what? You will find predators in any space, in any system. There are bad guys out there. But what stunned me was the response of the quote unquote good people in the churches who instead of these are the folks who have been raised on sexual morality, purity, right? All the things. And how it wasn't an aberration. It was the pattern. Time and again, the good Christian people in the church, in the organization, sided with the abuser. And it was the victim and the victim's family and anybody who tried to defend the victim who ended up ostracized. Right? This wasn't a one-off. This was a repeated pattern, and we continue to see it. And so I thought that needed to be explained. And that's, part of the story of Jesus and John Wayne. And then I resurfaced that again in Live, Laugh, Love.
And I would like to say, you make the case in Jesus and John Wayne that evangelical support in general, but particularly white evangelical support for Donald Trump wasn't really. We feel like it was an abandonment of evangelical or Christian values, but it wasn't really, because in so many ways it was the culmination of the values.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I'm hearing you say, as a historian, for those of us who love God for real and who really believe in Jesus and who really want to pattern our lives after Christ, to us it's an abandonment. But for the establishment and institutional religion, as a historian, you make the case, and I believe it's true, that Trump is a culmination of their values, not an abandonment. They're not abandoning their values. He is the epitome of what they value.
Exactly.
The people would say that Trump hijacked evangelical Christianity, but that is not true.
No.
That's not true. Really, he just is their champion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And it's so, it's so ironic too when you compare him to the other men in the book. And I grew up on John Wayne movies. I grew up in a town called Blue Ridge, Texas, so there were more cows than people and lots of big hats and belt buckles and all that kind of stuff. And now I can't stand John Wayne. And when I went and got a history degree, and then I, went and got my master's in religion, and critical thinking ruins a lot of that stuff. It ruins a lot of that stuff.
Amazing what information will do.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody want to ban books.
And it's a blessing in a way to have developed critical thinking skills by taking history classes and theology and religion classes and stuff like that. But you also, in Jesus and John Wayne, like Phyllis Schlafly, am I saying her name right?
Schlafly.
Schlafly. Yeah,
Schlafly.
I came across her in a modern American history class as an undergraduate. But I did not realize just how awful she was. And so women you start even in Jesus and John Wayne, which is about toxic patriarchy
Yes.
and Christian nationalism. But she was like one of the primary water carriers for these folks. But so walk us through sort of the connections and where there's some, I guess, disparate places between the two books. Between Live, Laugh, Love, which is, again, coming out September 15th. Pre-order it now.
You're right. So in Jesus and John Wayne, I gave one chapter, I think it was chapter 3, to women, talk about Phyllis Schlafly and Maribel Morgan just a bit, and Beverly LaHaye. And but then I had to kind of leave that there. That sets the foundation for what we see, kind of bear out. But the book's about evangelical masculinity. But evangelical masculinity and this militant masculinity goes hand in hand with a particular variant of Christian womanhood. And so I needed to set that up in the book. And then again, the last chapter in the book is about abuse. And so women kind of re-enter there. But it was frustrating to me because as a historian of women and gender, I wrote a book on masculinity, but most of my training is in women's history. Like, I knew that story was so much richer, and I knew that there was a lot of change over time. That yes, that sets the foundation, but there is so much more that that story entails. And so I kind of knew that the next project is going to be picking up that thread. And Live, Laugh, Love is different from Jesus and John Wayne in a number of ways, right? It's not just the flip side at all. And I knew it was going to be different right off the bat. And a clue to one of the key differences is in the book's subtitles. So the subtitle of Jesus and John Wayne is How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. It is about white evangelicals and white evangelical masculinity and militarism. Live, Laugh, Love is the secret history of white Christian women and the world they made. So right there, it's broader. And if you think about the title, Live, Laugh, Love, I do love sharing this in a room full of women because they know exactly what's going to be in there, right? They know it's going to have Hobby Lobby and mommy bloggers and Christian romance novels and Joanna Gaines and LuLaRoe, right? Yes, all of that's in there and a whole lot more. But if you think about even that constellation of topics, that this is not just a story about evangelicals narrowly. Evangelicals play an important role in this story, but it also includes Mormon women and mainline women and charismatic women, and it importantly includes the secular philosophy of positive thinking as well. Right. And if you think about all of these cultural products, all of that kind of makes sense. Manifesting, right? Wellness culture, all of that. And so what this book does is it shows how all of these strands are actually intertwined. And to demonstrate that, I went all the way back to the mid-19th century. And that's where I start teasing out these strands of evangelicalism, particularly holiness evangelicalism, which one offshoot is Pentecostalism, charismatic Christianity, and prosperity gospel. One strand is New Thought, which evolves into positive thinking, mind control. The mind controls reality. And then the other strand is Mormonism. And so the book is really like these three strands, how they interact, and where ideals of femininity ultimately come from. And that's one of the secrets in the book, where evangelical, quote unquote, biblical womanhood really comes from.
Interesting.
I live it. Such thing.
Okay.
Go
ahead. What was that?
And is there even a such thing as biblical womanhood? Or is it a construct of denomination, culture, misogyny, tradition? Whatever the case, but whatever the case is across all these denominations and religious things, there are women who are holding up, who are propping up the patriarchy, the toxic patriarchy. They help build it, they teach it, they market it, they sustain it.
Oh, totally.
They promote it wherever you can look online, anywhere, and you can throw a rock to the nearest church, and you're going to find some women that are helping to oppress other women.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's how this works. That's how this works. And that's why that subtitle is White Christian Women in the World They Made, right? They are working within constraints, but women have agency here. Women are creating the products. Women are discipling / indoctrinating other women. Women are enforcing the rules for other women. Women are shaming and shunning and teaching, right? This is how this works. Women are also suffering. Women are seeking to be faithful. Women are, right? It is a complex story. I think that's another difference where Jesus and John Wayne, because it was more narrowly focused and it really was looking at this strand of militancy and militarism, right? And the culmination in Trump. So it was a pretty clear kind of good guys and bad guys for the most part. Live, Laugh, Love is a more complicated story. Some of the women I thought I would dislike the most, I ended up having much more respect for through the historical research. Some, rather than, being frustrated with them or angry with them, I just by the end felt sad. Mostly the overwhelming emotion was sadness for what they had participated in and the repercussions in their own lives and in the lives of others. I think that, honestly, Live, Laugh, Love is a dark book, but not an angry book. It's a sad book, I think.
I live in Lancaster County, and so if I'm out and about in Pennsylvania, it's for people who don't know, there's a lot of Amish folks here.
Oh yes.
And I didn't realize that Amish romance was a thing beyond Lancaster County. I've seen those books, but apparently women, as soon as they heard the title of your book, they were like, "Oh, you're going to talk about Amish romance, aren't you?"
Oh yeah.
So what's that all about?
Yeah, I had so much fun writing on the Christian fiction. So how I do that is I have a chapter first before we get to Amish fiction on prairie fiction. And so we start with Little House on the Prairie and Laura Ingalls Wilder and Rose Wilder Lane. And I present that in terms of particularly like the economic values embedded in the Little House book and then later television show, the values of libertarianism, free market capitalism, right, individualism, and so on. And there's a body of scholarship that has already kind of tackled that, although a lot of ordinary readers just haven't encountered that. But that's not my contribution. I borrowed that from these other scholars. But then the second half of that chapter is an analysis of Janet Oakes' Love Comes Softly. And that book, it really reignited Christian fiction, and Christian fiction particularly aimed at women. There had been some in the 19th century, some in the early 20th century, but as Christian publishing was really taking off in the post-World War II era, most of that energy was almost all of it in nonfiction, inspirational nonfiction, devotionals, Bibles, and so on. And then Janet Oak comes along and she writes this manuscript of this really, evangelical faith-based pioneer fiction, but it also has those same economic values embedded in it. Free market capitalism, right? Individualism, pick yourself up from your own, by your own bootstraps, right? That kind of ideology, just pervasive. And that God blesses those who are obedient. And so that just absolutely takes off. And she had sent it to an editor at Bethany House who saw it. It was one of the few female editors in Christian publishing at the time, pushed to get it published. And that's a story of Love Comes Softly. It becomes this massive industry. And again, Christian fiction really takes off after that. Then about a little over a decade later, maybe 15 years, I have to think about my dates, 79 to 90s. That same editor receives a manuscript, and it is The Shunning, which is like the book that starts the Amish fiction craze. And so it's actually the same editor, same publishing house, and the books function in very similar ways. So I actually think about Amish fiction as kind of prairie fiction 2.0. And that absolutely takes the Christian publishing world by storm. I have some statistics in the book about like new titles are releasing. I think it's every 3 days. You go to a Christian Booksellers Association meeting, and there are literally women dressed in Amish garb, walking around the aisles. They are not actual Amish; they are sales reps, right? Like it is. There's workshops everywhere. How to write your own. I mean, that's where the money is. So lucrative. That's kind of the Amish fiction craze. And so, yes, so many. And I also talk about how women read these books. Many women read them as devotional material.
Really?
On their websites would take prayer requests. Yes, they would pray through the characters and they would relate to their characters spiritually. And so,
we have to think about this is all new to me. Like,
right. This is not like just like, oh, go read a book.
Oh my goodness.
Reading Christian fiction is a devotional act for so many women.
Wow. Like I said, I live around Amish people. I had no idea. And I think the first time I ever heard that Little House on the Prairie was libertarian was from, I think, in Heather Cox Richardson's How the South Won the Civil War. And she talked about Little House and also The Wizard of Oz. And I'm a Gen X kid. We watched Little House reruns after school, and I mean, you're not watching it when you're 12 with a critical eye, right?
No.
So, but those messages of free market capitalism and Christian libertarianism and all that kind of thing come through when you're watching it, even if you're not looking for it. So kind of ruined some of my childhood memories of watching, Half Pint run around and Mary and the whole Prairie crew.
Well, let me just say that what's really interesting about the remake. I don't know if you've seen the new series on Netflix.
I've seen that there is one.
Yeah, and they deliberately undercut that libertarian individualism in the new series.
Oh, really?
It was really one of these days I might write something on it, but it was really interesting to see. And I'll also say that I'm not a total killjoy. Like it's okay to partake in these like cultural productions. Sure. But it is helpful to do so with a critical eye and to think about what values are embedded in these products and how have they shaped us. And precisely because we aren't looking for, political indoctrination when we pick up a novel or when we, watch a Little House on the Prairie. For that reason, the influence can be so powerful because we are unsuspecting. So it kind of shapes our core values in a way that doesn't feel political, which then ends up, bearing fruit when we decide what our political views actually are.
Yeah. Wow. Another area that I would not have expected to be in a book about how white Christian women's ideology made the world is multi-level marketing.
Yeah.
And having been sucked into one of those in a vulnerable moment in my life, when the guy knew that I was vulnerable,
that's how it works.
That's how it works. And it was very, I found myself incredibly embarrassed that I had temporarily fallen for it.
Yeah.
And then when I pushed back, the guy got really nasty.
Yeah.
Right. Theologian, by the way. So
I think multi-level marketing is like the perfect place for religion for those things to merge, because I think most institutional religion and religious institutions are also multi-level marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, here's our product, join our group and sell our product.
Amen to that.
It's the same thing. So it makes sense that they are so closely related. Is this proselytizing a product or service versus a faith or a denomination?
No, so when so I knew that multi-level marketing was going to be part of this again, like live, laugh, love, like it's just part of it. It has to be. So it was while I was researching and writing the chapter on multi-level marketing that I had probably the biggest aha moment in the book. And it tracks with what you were just saying, December. It was because I was, studying multi-level marketing. I live just a couple miles from Amway's headquarters here. So I got a really lovely personalized tour of the company, and I was lurking in Facebook groups and reading memoirs, and I was constructing, how this world works. And it's not just recruitment, right? It's recruiting into this pyramid structure, and there are rules.
Lifestyle.
Yep, so many rules. So you have to respect and obey your upline. Your upline are those above you, like in the pyramid, and your profits feed their profits, right? And they get the bulk of your profits, but then you do the same to your downline. And so you always have to believe that your upline has your best interests at heart. Also, you need to avoid anything negative. What is negative? Doubt. Doubt is sin. Doubt is evil. You're not going to succeed if you doubt. Now, if you aren't succeeding, clearly you're doubting. Asking
You're not
questions
working
about
hard enough.
right. And where's
Not
this
praying hard
money
enough.
going? That's doubt. If you aren't succeeding, it's on you. And you have to cut yourself off from everything and everybody negative, which includes any family members who are like, are you sure about this? Negative, cut them out, right? And so it builds this kind of closed system. And then you literally have to pay for your own indoctrination. You have to buy the motivational tapes. You have to go to these and pay out of your own pocket to attend the sales conventions. You've got to do all the stuff. You've got to buy the product lines, and it is such a predatory system, and it is like a brilliant scheme to keep you captive, because if you are not succeeding, it's your own fault.
And the loyalty factor too in that.
So
like
loyal.
if you step outside, or if you can't fraternize with another team.
Nope.
You
can't go
train
across.
your upline.
Only up. Yes. Exactly.
You'll get shunned if you do certain things. Like they'll lock you out. It's just like a church.
Exactly. So that was my aha moment, where all of a sudden I was thick in this research, all the things you're just talking about there. And I was like, wait a minute, this is evangelicalism. And then I took a year or two to figure out, what the heck is this? What am I looking at? Where did these systems of manipulation and control come from? Where did these patterns of evangelism and working with small groups that are arranged in hierarchical order come from? Small group confession that secures loyalty, the use of shame and shunning to discipline members. That's really the heart of Live, Laugh, Love, teasing out where these manipulative practices originated.
Yeah.
Wow.
And another thing, in my own personal experience, most, if not all, of these multi-level marketers have a faith factor in them.
Yes.
They'll talk about God and how God gave them this divine opportunity, and how God is bringing them to you, and God wants you to be wealthy, and this is it's all like
it is all the same thing.
It's all in the pot.
Yep. 100%. So you've got, Amway, obviously, Mary Kay,
Avon.
Yeah. So Avon wasn't technically multi-level marketing. That was earlier, and they do the direct sales, but not the same kind of structure. But Mary Crowley, these are like Mary Crowley, Mary Kay, the Vanandel DeVos with Amway. These guys are not just, kind of direct sales pioneers. They're also devout evangelicals. And what I show in the book is, yes, how they incorporated evangelicalism, positive thinking into these companies to create these systems of control. And then how they also helped build the Christian right, the political architecture, right, that secure, quote unquote, conservative values, primary ones being free market capitalism, anti-regulationism, right, to preserve their own business model.
Yeah, it's weird because I went to seminary, and in seminary you read the Bible a lot, And I don't remember reading the free market capitalism parts of the Bible. And a book that I'll plug another book for another historian, Kevin Cruz's One Nation Under God, blew my mind because of the Christian libertarian sort of angle. And the more I read books like yours and Heather Cox Richardson's and Kevin Cruz's, it's just like I was swimming in that world for a very long time as a Southern Baptist, and I just had no idea. Because fish don't know that they're in water. They're just, it's just where they're at, right? And it's so, what's so insidious about it, and from what I was able to read of the new book and also is the networking and the connections that they make, and how you sort of explicated the Christian publishing boom of the 50s. And then, everybody's blurbing everybody's books. Everybody's going on it, preaching in everybody's churches. And that's something that the right does, particularly the religious right, does so much better than anybody with a modicum of progressivism or, I consider myself a leftist, but it's just so diffuse, and it's not, we can't stop fussing over whether or not we should be, how liberal we should be. It seems like we're more interested in punching down on people like Dr. Abdul El Sayed and Zoran Mamdani than we are on taking care of the fascist sexual predator at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's mind-blowing to me, but they've got it nailed. And they're only, 30% of the population? Is that, am I getting that number right?
Are you talking evangelicals or?
Yeah.
Evangelicals are much less than that. Evangelicals are around 15%, but they make up 25% of the electorate and 40% of the Republican Party. So they punch above their weight, right? And we're just talking white evangelicals, and we could talk, if you look at the white mainline, for example, that's why I'm talking white Christian women here and Mormons, right? But the white mainline, if you just want to look electoral politics, 61% of white mainliners voted for Trump as well, right? And evangelicals get a ton of attention, and they're rightly so. If you look at literally any survey data, the outliers are always white evangelicals, right? They're up there, but white mainliners, right? 61%. So you also don't, that's really critical in terms of these elections. But the connections, and one of the things I do in the center of the book, and I absolutely cite Kevin Cruz, other historians like Darren Dochuk, really critical work. But what I realized is to map out this culture and where it came from, and to go down these rabbit holes, I ended up having to remap 20th century American religion, which I did not set out to do in this book. But I have a chapter that's called, I think it's chapter 4, Different Sides of the Same Street. And that's a quote from Norman Vincent Peale. Right? Positive thinker, mainline, power of positive thinking, right? We tend to put him in this box over here. So Norman Vincent Peale, mainline. Billy Graham over here, he's evangelical, right? And then you've got Oral Roberts, he's Pentecostal, and we like our neat categories. What I show in that chapter is, as Norman Vincent Peale says about Graham, we are working different sides of the same street. We're after the same thing, and it was anti-New Deal liberalism, pro-free market capitalism, and quote unquote conservative values. And they are not just after the same thing. They are in the same rooms, scheming together, working together, and drawing the same corporate funders behind their projects. Right. That's really, really key to understand. And so my work builds on Cruz's, but really essentially the takeaway is these things that we thought were all these different strands, they're not. They're all the same. It makes me
think about when you said that they all are in the same room working together. You know what it put me in the mind of? Project 2025.
Yep.
It put me in the mind of that. And when you said, you have the evangelicals and they get most of the heat. I think it's because there's such a contrast between what we think about Jesus in the scripture and then what we think about Trump. So they catch a lot of the heat. But you said the mainlanders, center of the road, they also voted for him. But the evangelicals catch most of the heat. Yeah. But there's it's just, you got nationalism, you got Christian nationalism, and you got white Christian nationalism, and you just got white nationalism.
Yes.
And all those things,
it's a Venn diagram. Yes.
It's almost a closed circle.
There's a lot of overlap.
Not quite, but there's you know what I'm saying? Because believe it or not, there's some black Christian nationalists and black nationalists, believe it or not, and white supremacy is a hell of a drug. You'd be surprised how many brown and black people are white nationalists.
Yes.
Yeah. I know that sounds crazy, but true story. I promise you.
Yeah. I mean,
I think about that, and as it relates to what you wrote in your book and your studying and all that. And my question for you too is, there's so much intersectionality between race, gender, consumer culture, the militarism, the American identity are tangled up in Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. But is it really a theological problem? I don't know. Is Christianity like the language that's used to legitimize the bigger problem, which is more cultural and political? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, like, totally.
Is it really a theological issue, or it's not really? That's like really a smoke screen, like a straw man. It's really this issue over here that's getting a voice in Christianity.
No, that's an excellent question. Mm-hmm. Theology does provide the permission structure. I think that one of the to make a lot of people mad at me, probably not your core listeners, but if we look at the doctrine of inerrancy, we can see how it was so selectively and unevenly applied. Right? Was the doctrine of inerrancy is the doctrine of inerrancy applied to how many verses do we have in the Bible about wealth and poverty and justice and loving your neighbors, loving your enemies? Where are our rigid inerrantist interpretations? There. Where is it applied? Gender, right? Sexuality. Like, if you don't align with us and our interpretation of these 3 verses, you are out of the church, not a Christian, tool of the devil. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, that's where you see, right, theology being a powerful permission structure to really anything, any of this, all of this. But theology is also very important, and Live, Laugh, Love is it goes pretty deep into theology. It talks about the differences between holiness evangelicalism and Calvinism, and then the emergence of Keswick theology as a variant of holiness evangelicalism, and how it differs from Pentecostalism. Then it introduces dispensationalism and inerrancy. And then in the 20th century, we pick those threads back up and we add Christian Reconstructionism. And what happens when you take kind of the holiness evangelicalism, the power of the Spirit, and the requirement of total submission, which originally was to God, but easily morphs into total submission to the authorities God has placed over you. What happens when you mix that with Christian Reconstructionism and this hierarchical view of the world? Hierarchical in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of economics, all of that, right? This is another kind of through line of the book. So theology absolutely matters. And yes, theology is weaponized, is selectively applied, but is absolutely crucial. And we've been having these theological battles for generations. Everybody has their apologetics framework. They've got their pat answers, right? I think one of the things that history does that is so disruptive is it shows how things that, say in this case, conservative evangelicals are claiming to be biblical, timeless, God ordained, were made by men, and sometimes women, usually men, in a particular historical moment to achieve particular ends, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why Jesus and John Wayne was so controversial, because if it had just been a theology book, they're a dime a dozen, right? They can easily be ignored. But history doesn't tell you this theological interpretation is right or wrong. And that made them so mad that I wouldn't go on record on every, theological issue. I'm like, it doesn't even matter what I think. Some of these, I don't even know what I think, right? I'll tell you what I think on some things, but that's not the point. You still have to deal with this historical evidence, right? And you can no longer claim that your view rests on this solid, timeless authority.
Right. All the way back to the apostles. We got it figured out. My Church of Christ grandparents said, it literally says Church of Christ on the door because we go all the way back to the apostles. And even as a teenager, I was like, I'm not sure that's how it works. But what gets me is that at the moment, for now, we've got these disparate theological thinkers and groups coming together for what they feel is a similar common goal.
Yes.
So we've got Kevin Roberts, who's a hard right Catholic, sitting down with William Wolfe, who is a misogynistic, racist Southern Baptist who pretends he's not racist. And they're
pretend well.
Well, no, he used to on Twitter, and now he's just full on embracing it because that's the natural progression. And then you've got the people like Webon and Doug Wilson, these new Calvinists, sort of Rushdoony adjacent or Rushdoony in bed with kind of people. And people used to get killed.
Yeah.
Over the differences that these groups of people have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gets me. Is that if they get their way, if the statement on Christian nationalism and the gospel, which was partially written by Joel Webon, and William Wolfe was one of the editors, and Dusty Devers, that dipshit from Oklahoma, was one of the people. If they get their way, the fur's going to fly.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what history has shown. And I don't think that there are enough people concerned about that aspect of this whole Christo-fascist project, Christian supremacy project that we've got going on. Because the NAR folks are going to have some different, eschatological beliefs, and the Wilsonian acolytes are going to have very different beliefs. And at some point, it's not going to be just kumbaya, we're all Christian nationalists or Christian supremacists. It's going to get ugly. Did you see when you were researching this, because you talked about these disparate threads, even Mormonism, and I went to Salt Lake about 13 years ago, and I was really shocked to learn that Salt Lake City has the highest per capita rate of breast augmentation.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, because Mormon women apparently love, balloon boobs. But so you've got all these disparate threads, including Mormonism. Did you notice in there any theological sort of infighting, or was it all this sort of hodgepodge of it morphs into this, what you call white Christian woman's ideology?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. In the white Christian space, the women's space in particular. Yeah, there are certainly some differences, theological differences, although those differences in the popular women's culture are much less pronounced than in male-dominated and controlled spaces. So, certainly if you're in a denominational women's ministry, there may be some gatekeeping there. One of the bigger divides was and has been, but is diminishing, is simply between mainstream evangelical and charismatic, right?
Okay.
That's where, but then some of these big women's events would platform both. And, so you'll have Beth Moore on stage with Christine Kane, and, you'll have Joyce Meyer dropping in at, at Evangelical Ministries Conference. But so yes, in the women's ministry space, you'll have some kind of boundary setting, but you'll also have more mixing. Because, for the most part, these women are not, they're not employed at seminaries. They are not trained at seminaries, the vast majority of them. Right. And so and they're writing more on, I love how Beth Moore put it, like she wasn't, she couldn't, as a Christian women's speaker, she couldn't just serve it straight up. She couldn't just talk about Jesus and the Bible. It always had to be served up with milk and cookies, and you had to.
Right, yeah.
So her milk and cookies was Christian aerobics, and so that's what she would do. And then she would get to add a little bit about Jesus around the edges initially, early in her career. And so in women's spaces, right, that there was a lot more kind of flexibility there. But importantly, when you look at women as consumers, that's where you see anything goes, right? If a book is on the shelf in a Christian bookstore, it's fair game. If a song is being played on Christian radio, whether it comes from Hillsong or Vineyard or, from Amy Grant, you're listening to it. You're singing along to it. You might be praying along to it, right? And that's where you have just so much intermingling and mixing in Christian women's spaces. And so, because this is a book about Christian women, right, the book itself really reflects that. And then I make the argument that, hey, this isn't a sideshow here. Purely looking at the numbers, in American Christianity, women outnumber men. So shouldn't we be centering women? And once we center women in the narrative, this is where we end up. And it's a complicated history, but also makes so much more sense of where we are today.
I can't wait for it to come out because of what you just said, that last part about there's so many more women in churches.
Yeah.
There's so many more women doing the church work, as Desimber often says. If the women leave, ain't nothing getting done.
Nothing.
And so often women in history are just swept to the side.
Yeah.
We don't talk about women. We talk about great men doing great things, especially great white men doing great white men things, like Teddy Roosevelt, that white supremacist. So September 15th is when it comes out.
Yep.
And you're going to be doing book events.
I'm doing a massive book tour, actually. I haven't posted all of the details, but it'll be up on my Substack soon. I'm going to Texas, to Colorado Springs, to North Carolina a couple of times. I'm going to, Austin, Denton, Waco in Texas. I am going to Kansas City, to Minneapolis.
Are you going to New York?
Yes, I'll be in New York City once or twice.
Okay.
Doing a really fun event at Riverside Church. And
oh, nice.
Yeah. And I'll be in DC and a couple of times. So I'm sure I'm forgetting places. I don't even know. The next 3 months are going to be a blur, but it's also going to be really amazing to meet so many readers.
Oh, that sounds fun. Where can people find you on social media if they want to just follow your day-to-day and your sort of short form writing and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm most active on Substack. You can find me at Du Mez Connections, DUMEZ Connections. And then I'm also on various social media platforms at KK Du Mez. All
right. Very good. Folks, if you haven't read Jesus and John Wayne, I highly recommend that. And when this Live, Laugh, Love, what's the subtitle again?
Live, Laugh, Love, The Secret History of White Christian Women and the World They Made.
Make sure you get that and follow Dr. Du Mez on the Substack and other social media platforms. We will be back next week. Desimber, who's our guest next week?
Well, actually, we have 2 guests next week. Monday, out of not our normal schedule, Monday at 3:00, we have Pastor Cody Deese of Vinings Lake Church. Just a dynamic preacher. He's all in, 10 toes down against Christian nationalism, and he is not quiet about it, and we love that for him and for us. Okay. And then we have on the 20th, Thursday, we have Dan Henderson, author Dan Henderson, with his book coming out, who's also our fellow choir member. So we're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward. I'm going to try to make my way to New York to see Ms. Du Mez. That's what
I would love to see you there.
I think me and Dillon need to figure out how to come to New York to see you and maybe drop by when we do our show with John Fugelsang. We can make it a double date trip where we come and see you too.
I love John, and you can tell him that he is amazing.
He said last night when I mentioned that we were having you tonight, he goes, "I adore that woman." So he's probably he said he was going to
get her on the show when we're on the show in New York. I don't know. We need your New York days. We need to work something out.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a plan.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Du Mez, for your work, for your powerful voice, and for those who don't know, Kristin is a practicing Christian. So do not listen to the haters of the world who don't like what she has to say, because she's pointing out the fundamentalist fuckwittery that is so rampant in white evangelical spaces, particularly the Mark Driscoll type spaces.
You can criticize the church and still be a Christian, just like you can criticize Trump and still be an American. So
amen.
There you go. Amen to that.
And love your country. You could love God and the church and criticize the church. If you really love God, you might just do that.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, thank you, folks. Like, subscribe, and share this episode and every episode. And if you like what we're doing, check out December Rose's Substack, Purple Faith, and the Tattooed Theologian Substack. That's me. And let's keep building the progressive voices to push back against the Christo-fascist takeover of the country. We need everybody to do their bit. Peace be with y'all.